Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a clean sheet as a game in which the opposing team is prevented from scoring. It is a noun. In a sentence, the team's star goalie has had 5 clean sheets this season. Someone forgot to tell the Dub goalkeepers that because we had none of them to kick off the new season with 31 goals across the 6 games in a jam-packed weekend where it became obvious just 20 minutes into the opening game at Ironbark Fields that the Dub was going to dub in the best way possible. We'll talk about all the highlights, the lowlights, the screamers, and the silencers on this episode of the Dubcast, part of the Roundball Australia podcast network. My name is Poletti, and joining me for episode 3 of the Dubcast is Burke. Burke, how was Ironbark Fields and the chaos that ensued? Because you looked very unhappy on the broadcast.
It was cold, so I would just like to say I was being affected by a number of things. The cold was one of them. I did receive a paper ticket though, which I did really enjoy. The football was good too, but I was mostly focused on being very cold and getting a paper ticket. Yeah, no, crazy game. Chloe Lagazzo took it very personally that they got scored on, and that was about it for what happened there. Yeah, very crazy.
Yeah, I remember the last time I got a paper ticket at a football match. It was also in Victoria at an NPL men's Victoria contest that I attended at the Olympic Village, and I was very surprised. But I suppose that makes sense. Victoria is still yet to catch up to the rest of the country.
Okay, settle down. Settle down there. Move on. Next topic.
All right, catching strays already.
No bashing here. Oh no, not even 60 seconds in the podcast.
And that voice you hear is Christian Montegan, who's joining us for his first appearance here on the Dubcast. Christian, what did you make of all the weekend's action to kick off the new A-League women's season?
Good evening, Poletti. Yeah, well, obviously a lot of goals. I think 31 goals. I think it broke the record across the A-League. So I thought that was surprising, actually, when I saw 31. Obviously, that's a high number, but I thought surely there must have been more during one round. But no, obviously with the women's, this is, I think, the second season now where there's 6 games across, across a match day. So obviously more room for goals, more room for entertainment. And yeah, across all 6 games, to be honest, it was fairly entertaining. So can't wait to talk about it in depth.
Yeah, this is a league that has had games with like 13 goals in them at different points and, 9-7 score lines and all these sorts of different crazy, wonderful things. But we've never had 31 goals in a round of football, which is
crazy.
Absolutely insane. We'll get straight into the action because there's a lot to dissect from round 1. Burke, what was your big storyline from the weekend?
Big storyline. I would probably say City, or Sydney kind of missing probably more so Sydney actually missing the starting gun, I guess. Very, very strange performance from them. So I would say Sydney's lack of attendance at their game against Central.
Yeah, that was a game for me where it became very obvious very early that Sydney very much looked like a side that had mass turnover in the squad and that they hadn't quite gelled properly, which, to be fair, they were a heavily turned over squad. No Taylor Ray, no Courtney Vine, no Charlotte McLean, no Jada Wyman. There's a lot of big names missing from that lineup. The Mariners came to play. Sarah Langman was the star of the first half. Sydney couldn't quite capitalise in front of goal, and they were made to pay in the second half by a Mariners side that, as I said, looked like they came to play. Emily Husbands got them moving incredibly well. Clearly took last season's semi-final loss to heart and wanted to start early on the front foot, start the season with a bang, and now the benchmark's been set, hasn't it, Christian?
It has. And I think, one of the question marks coming with Central Coast is, obviously they made the semi-finals last season and we thought, okay, coming into this season, is that high bar and expectation going to be a problem for them, this season? Because they've lost a few players now in the off-season. The likes of Kai Simon, for example, these types of high quality experienced players. We know Emily Husband's capable. She obviously outperformed, exponential levels last season. You can tell she's tactically, adaptable, flexible. She can get the best out of her squad. And to come into the league after a 14-year absence and do what she did and the team did was absolutely phenomenal. But now do you say, what's the expectation? Is it lowered now because of these changes coming in? You mentioned Sydney FC and the turnover there in the off season. It took some time to gel, but you could easily say the same thing for the Mariners. And I thought they took the game on better than Sydney did. It's not that the Sky Blues, I think, underestimated them. Obviously, they played each other in the semis last season. It was a fairly, close affair, but I just thought the Mariners had a bit more energy, especially in that final third, and it showed in the end. And perhaps you could probably put it down to a bit, in terms of the fitness levels. We'll get to Melbourne City later, but they've obviously played in the Women's Champions League, for the past few weeks, and perhaps that maybe gave them an advantage, especially in those latter stages. And, although Princess Sabini did pull one back in the end, I thought, too little, too late. They just didn't turn up, if I'm being quite honest. So whether that's sort of a trend moving forward for Sydney, it's highly unlikely. You fully expect Sydney to bounce back after this. But from the Mariners' point of view, this is probably a positive sign moving forward to say, okay, they can, take the positives from last season into this season and turn into, another successful campaign.
Burke, they've set the bar. Do you think that they can maintain it for 22 more rounds?
I hope so. I think it'd be great if they could. I think, like Christian was saying, Emily Husband has done a fantastic job. I don't know if they will sustain it for 22 games. I think they could. I think they're capable of it, but I don't think they will.
And then this result's not going to define Sydney's season. It's a round one game. I think they started slow last year as well, if memory serves me correctly. Like it's not going to be the end of the world for them, but they travel up to Brisbane, who looked very good against Canberra United, and we'll touch on that game a little bit later. 2 straight losses to start the season before they go into the Sydney Derby against a Wanderers side who, yes, have never beaten Sydney FC, but this is a different Wanderers side than what we've seen in seasons past over the last couple of years. It really has to be, they need to put in a performance against Brisbane Roar, in my opinion, Burke.
Yeah, definitely. I think going down 2 losses it'd look really bad. I mean, they won the championship last season. Turnovers or not, they're meant to be, and they should be, one of the top teams in the league. That being said, as someone from Melbourne, I can't say I'd be that mad about it.
I second that.
They really wouldn't be living up to the expectations and what everyone knows of Sydney FC. They're not meant to be a opening round, second round, 2 losses. That's not who they are. So, but this is the dub. Anything can and will happen. So,
as this weekend showed indeed. Christian, what was your big storyline out of the weekend's action?
Don't mean to be biased, but it has to be Victory, because if I bring up this stat, so the past 2 seasons, Victory have actually lost their opening 2 games of the season. If you remember back even last season, they struggled. They lost to, I believe, Brisbane Roar and Western, if memory serves me right. And so I knew this game coming was going to be a danger game, a banana skin, if you want to call it, against an Adelaide side who, let's be frank, did not have the best of seasons last year. Finished up with the wooden spoon, very unconvincing. But first game of the new season, you're going to expect a burning fire in your belly to sort of rectify those wrongs from last season. I thought, actually, to be fair, Adelaide had a pretty decent first half. It was just they lacked that, I guess, cutting edge, going forward, where the goal sort of, dried up a bit. Who's going to, convert the chances? And Victory, they've got to play an Emily Gilnick, who we know her quality, obviously playing with the Matildas, and Victory now in her second season there, with her return there. So I think Victory do have a lot of weapons there available. Alani Murphy's another one. I thought she was outstanding in midfield. I mean, you look at the first goal, the way she just dictated that move, the pass going forward. Just whenever she's on the ball, I feel like time stops for a second because she has so much time. You can tell her vision, her talent's there. She really impressed me in that game. But yeah, it was really frantic. One goal to each side after 6 minutes. But I thought after that, especially in the second half, Victory really, I guess, dictated the momentum of the game. So yeah, that was probably my key takeaway because Victory got knocked out to the Mariners in that elimination final. You're thinking, okay, is this sort of not the end of Jeff Hopkins' reign, but has he got the best out of this team? And we know, obviously he's a proven winner. He's got that experience behind him, but can he do it with a new group of players? And so far, given that performance against Adelaide, as long as you're getting the 3 points, it doesn't matter if it's ugly. It doesn't matter if you're not playing at your best. If you just get those 3 points, unlike Sydney FC, Poletti, that they couldn't do, that's a positive sign for me. And yeah, that was my big takeaway.
I guess I deserve to catch that straight.
You did.
First half brace to Emily Gilnick, 92nd minute winner to Ava Breedis, secured 3 points for Victory. They've kept the core of their squad together, so certainly didn't look out of place as a unit. For me, looking at a Victory perspective, Burke, I thought the biggest concerning sign in this game is how both of these goals were conceded. They were both conceded off turnovers. Courtney Newborn made the first save both times, but gave up the rebound, wasn't able to maintain control of the ball, and it allowed Fiona Wirtz to score from a combined distance of 5.5 yards across her brace.
Yeah, it was very much like the two goals that City conceded. Where it's like, why didn't you learn? It literally just happened, guys. Please. But credit to Adelaide and credit to Perth for finding those opportunities and taking them and making the absolute most of them. Um, yeah, I you gotta feel bad for Newborn because she was doing the right thing. Was she let down by her defenders? It can go either way. Um, but yeah, credit to Adelaide for making that happen. They look a lot sharper to me than they did last season. Um, and it seemed like at the end they just kind of ran out of steam, or they kind of decided that we're happy with a draw, so we're not gonna keep going, which ended up biting them pretty badly. Um, but yeah, not great from Victory to be conceding goals like that with the players that they have. So
Yeah, vastly different side for Adrian Centre this season. A lot of turnover in place, and the building blocks are there. And as you mentioned, they did look good throughout portions of this game. Matilda McNamara comes back to help shore up the back line. Fiona Wirtz looked great for Adelaide. As I said, she scored that brace. On another day, they probably secure all 3 points in this fixture, or at the very least get one. So, there weren't a lot of games that you could say that about last season for Adelaide. So, a lot of promising signs here. And I think if they can take this performance, bottle it up, and sort of bring it out each week, they're going to win. Oh, sorry, they're going to get points in more games than they don't. I can't say win. We haven't seen that yet this season, but they're going to get points in more games than they don't. And I think when you're in the process of a rebuild, that's probably the best you can hope for. And you sort of touched on it, Burke, where I'm going to go for my big storyline is we're going to head to Casey Fields. I refuse to call it by that sponsor's name, mostly because I don't know how to pronounce said sponsor's name. Melbourne City 5, Perth Glory 2. We talked in our season preview about how the Asian Women's Champions League could be slightly deceptive when it came to Melbourne City in assessing their performance, their playing style. It really wasn't. It really is. It really is. Same city, new coach. Same Melbourne City, same dominance, same problems. They dominate possession. They had 69% in this game. They dictate the pace of play. They keep the ball as high up the pitch as possible. create a massive volume of shots to try and win the game. In this particular contest, it was 18 with 9 of those on target. And their finishing just needs so much work. And I know it's very weird to say that when you've scored 5 goals with 9 of them going on target, but this was not a good performance from City. I just like that they were just like, even if they just got like another 2 or 3 on target, this would look a lot more respectable than it was. It's half your shots over the crossbar, off to the side, Burke. I just I have to wonder when this style of play is going to come falling down from City if they can't finish.
Yeah, to be clear, I watched this game whilst I was at my job on my phone. So I was like in between doing my job and then checking it and then being like, what do you mean they're two down? um, and then complaining to everyone in within earshot, being like, why has this happened? Not that they knew anything, or not that they could help me. Um, yeah, it was kind of a like Hail Mary moment that Polisina decided she was going to take the game into her own hands, kind of thing, and turn it around. But you're absolutely right about the shot conversion. You can't be taking nearly 20 shots. You can't. Like you can't be doing that. And they're missing more of them. They're not. Um, Obviously it is the first game of the season and the teams in the A Leagues are of, a good standard. Perth aren't, they're not bad. I mean, they scored 2 goals, didn't they? Um, I wish the game had felt more. I feel this way always watching City. I kind of feel like the games, I wish they were more balanced. They never are because that's the way City plays. So I'm just really asking and wishing for something that's never going to happen. I don't know if it's going to come falling down on City because it's so ingrained in them. I think that the more that they play, the better it's hopefully going to get, especially with the backline and the goalkeeper. Because whatever was going on with the keeper and the defenders was not good at all. I hope to never see that again. Obviously, City were missing Rebecca Stott, who was out with a little precautionary miss, but you can tell that they really did miss her. I think City are a different team when Rebecca Stott's on the pitch, especially if she's on from the start. Like if she subs off later in the game, it's a bit different, but yeah, when she's on the pitch, City are a completely different team. So hopefully see her back next week or the week after.
And Christian, I sort of posed the question very deliberately the way I did of when this might come falling down on Melbourne City. If you go back to last year's grand final, they had 14 shots, only 3 of them on target, 72% possession, but fell 1-0 to Sydney FC, who had 6 shots, 3 of those on target, and very much scored their goal on the counter with only 28% possession. There was a game against the Wanderers last year where it was very much the same story. They got done 1-0 at Parramatta Stadium, Western Sydney Stadium during Unite round. Like, I very much worry that despite all the talent that's there, this is going to, like, there's going to be a game where it's just going to be, 1 goal too many to concede, or 1 shot too many missed, and if that starts to become a pattern, that they won't be able to get out of it.
Yeah, you could be right in a sense, but at the same time, I guess you've got to give it some time because I know last season it was a problem as well. You touched on that grand final, and I remember vividly that was one of the major problems. Like they dominated a lot of that game against Sydney, and then to their frustration, just you just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. We know in football, if you don't do that, then a quality side like Sydney on the counter attack, on the break, they can absolutely tear you apart, and that's all they needed, just one opportunity. Um, so, I mean, they're creating the chances. That's not the problem. It's just obviously putting them away. And I feel as though sometimes they're a bit too cute in the way they build up their play in the final third. There's, a couple more passes that they play when they shouldn't. Just take the shot earlier. Or there could be instances where they just take shots and way out when, there's a pass there to be played. So I think the structure still needs a bit of work because, yes, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have that structure in place, progressing the ball forward, and once you're in that final third, it's like, okay, we're here now, but what do we do with the ball? So I don't think, it's a case of that. It's more just putting the ball in the back of net, like we've all touched on here. So I don't think it's panic stations as such, but in this derby coming against Victory, if the same problems arise, and we've touched on talent, Victory do have that as well. So that could be very interesting to see. If City don't take their opportunities, then it could come to punish them. Because yes, while Rebecca Stott didn't play in this game, she's absolutely influential for this side. You can absolutely tell when she's not there on the pitch. They really struggle playing out from the back as well. I thought against Perth, I thought they were one step too slow. Usually they pass the ball a bit more fluently, quicker. It's more crisp, but even that was a bit off against Perth, and it took a bit of time to get into it. So it's still early days. We can't judge them too much, but I think if we do see the same patterns in the next few weeks, then that's when we can sort of start to judge a bit more.
And we'll turn our attention to Perth now. It went up 2-0, 51st minute, and then shipped 5 in the next 35 odd minutes. Kelly Brown scored, caught the keeper off a line. Mika Sanaga did the same thing, although I think we can throw an assistance to the wind there. That held the ball up before it crossed the line. That MacArthur Rams connection really playing well for Stephen Peters' side in this opening game on the score sheet. I mean, they certainly looked good in my opinion, but for me, I think this is going to be a big problem for Perth this season is the defense. It turned up for the first 50 odd minutes, and then they shipped 5 goals. Some of those were very well preventable had things kind of worked out the right way. I think Peters is going to take a lot of lessons out of this one, Burke.
Yeah, I think part of the real reason for Perth's defense was the retirement of Tash Rigby. She was their captain and now is the manager of female football at Football West, so Western Australia. But she was absolutely crucial to the side, not just as a defender but as a leader. So I think losing her has made a real unfortunate difference to Perth's defense. Hopefully, after the week's horror show, they can step up from there, and hopefully it won't get any worse than conceding 5 for them this season. I think the change in personnel has really impacted them defensively.
Just before we move on from this game, I do want to remind everyone that you can send us questions on Twitter. We're going to be putting out a post each week where you can get your questions in, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video if you are watching via YouTube, which is what Grim_Toys has done. He did that during our season preview video. He thinks that their biggest loss is going to be Julia Grosser. Her speed out wide was incredible. It was a huge difference in City's attack when she missed some games last year, and he was hoping that they would try and steal Lara Gooch. But the question is what we all think about Melbourne City playing out at Casey Fields. He thinks that the women deserve to be playing where the men do, giving them the best chance to build a larger crowd. The crowds at Casey Fields last season were embarrassingly small because it's so far away and that it isolates many supporters. Last year, they were premiers and the crowds there were tiny. What happens when they have a rough year? The crowd was 582 on Sunday afternoon. It's a gorgeous day in Melbourne. It was only one of 2 crowds not to hit 4 figures this weekend, and the other one was at Iron Barkfields, and we're going to touch on that game next. Burke, as the City fan and one of our 2 resident Melburnians, and Christian, I'll come to you for your thoughts in a second. I think there's a point here. What is the solution to build a crowd? Because 582 is not good.
No. I think it's mostly because Casey Fields isn't a stadium. Casey Fields is a training ground that they've shipped some temporary seats into. There's no shade there at all, and there's no this is the same. They have this same problem at Ironbark Fields, but they do have an actual proper stand there. There's nothing built up around it, so it gets really windy, which we saw did have an impact on the game. Um, yeah, the crowd sizes for City have been pretty small generally. I think, yeah, the fact that it's so far out east is
Mm.
also annoying. I mean, I live in the inner southeast, usually, and it takes me like a good 45 minutes to get there on a good day. I wish they did play where the men's play, but obviously that is not something that's a reality in this competition for whatever reason. I don't want to get into that. I think the way, I guess, to fix it is maybe more community interaction, especially with like clubs, like grassroots clubs that are in the area, um, to at least get people out to Casey Fields because they have football, like AFL teams out there that do quite well. You could try tapping in there. They should be if they're not already. And yeah, tickets are free. Well, tickets were free. I don't know why people weren't getting down. It's probably because of the location and the lack of facilities out there. Again, because it's a training ground. Um, yeah, a real stadium would be nice.
Christian, as our other resident Melburnian, we know that when Amy Park is pumping, it's one of the best stadiums in the country. But then you get situations like Monday night in the A League Men where it's Western United against Melbourne City, and there's bugger all people there, and it just looks cavernous, much like Suncorp Stadium did last week for Brisbane Roar versus Sydney FC, also in the A League Men competition. 8,000 in a 52,000 seat stadium. If even if say playing in Amy Park inside the city itself were to help drive more fans, would 2,000 in a 30,000 seat capacity stadium almost look worse than what it does at Casey Fields?
I think there's a point there that it would look worse in terms of the overall product because, yeah, we had this discussion last night on the podcast about Suncorp Stadium where you had all the fans on the left side and then on TV there was just literally all these empty seats. And I argue with Japer, we agreed on the same point. We said the only way to fix it is winning. And Melbourne City women don't have that problem. They've been a rather successful side in the past few seasons, so that's not the problem to get the crowds. But I do think at least having the games at Amy Park every week, if that was a possibility, then at least fans would know, okay, this is where we're going to be playing each week. We don't have to go and drive 45 minutes, what Burke was referring to before. Stuff like that. At least there's consistency about it because if you've got fans traveling, left, right, and center, and there's no real consistency there, then you're going to see these lowering numbers, unfortunately. And I think in terms of why they don't play at Amy Park, I mean, we've got two teams in Melbourne that have their home games at Amy Park. In terms of the men, and the fact that they can't share it around, it's not a groundskeeping issue because we've got a double header on Saturday. We've got the Melbourne Derby first, and then Victory play Brisbane later on at about 5 p.m. So that's not the issue. I think there should be a bit of leeway in terms of the fixturing and the scheduling to accommodate that because otherwise you're just going to be seeing these types of numbers, 500 here, 1,000 at training facilities, like Burke said, and it just doesn't look good overall. And the fans and the players, the clubs just don't deserve it, to be quite frank. So whether anything changes, in the short term, in the long term, it's a bit of a wait and see. But it is frustrating. I do see that point.
Hopefully, they can start to get larger crowds out at Casey Fields. We'll head to Ironbark Fields now as we go from the east of Melbourne to the west of Melbourne. A 6-goal thriller, 4-2 in favour of the home side. 807, I think, was the number in attendance that I mentioned. Yep, 807. Again, it's one of those things where there's nothing around it. The men got 4,200 last week when Juan Mata came to town with the Wanderers, their new biggest crowd. So there's football fans there. I think this might just they're playing out of their own stadium, so I think this might just be a case of a couple of years where, as things start to build up around it, families can begin to make a day of it, and there's a shopping precinct, so you can go have lunch before you go to the ground and things like that. And I think for this one as well, what hurt is the kickoff time. If Melbourne is anything like Sydney when it comes to peak hour traffic, there is no way that fans were getting there by 7 p.m. on Friday night. Um, so I think that might have played into it as well. In terms of the game itself, like Western United started slow. The Knicks weren't quite able to capitalise on the chances they created. They did get an own goal. Lest I draw the fury of Kieran Yap, I'm not going to mention who scored said own goal. Which was followed by a 2 minute brace to Western United, and 20 minutes later, a 2 minute brace to Western United, sealing the game off inside the opening 45 minutes before a late penalty to Wellington was converted by Emma Main. Gave them a brief glimmer of hope. I want to focus on Wellington first, Burke. In the season preview that you wrote on Roundball Australia, you mentioned the concept of small ball and how Paul Temple, utilizes it, describing it as it relies heavily on possession, retention, and the exploitation of space. Temple wants and has his players moving the ball quickly and carefully through opposing teams. How do they execute that in a game like this where they ship 4 goals in the space of 35 minutes?
Honestly, I don't really know. I don't want to blame it on inexperience, but the other thing about Phoenix this season is that a lot of their players are scholarship players that are first time dub players this season. So if it's a case of them just doing like basically a trial by fire kind of thing, where after this week they'll have seen what they're expected to do and how they're expected to play, and then go from there. Um, but yeah, the game plan, like the small ball idea, works in theory, and it sounds good in theory. I think it may just be a case of like needing more time for the players to gel. But yeah, who can say?
Christian, we saw at halftime that Paul Temple wasn't afraid to make substitutions, that he clearly wanted a response from his players in the second half, and he got it, even though, by the time the goal eventually came, it was too little too late.
Mm.
I guess if there's one positive to be taken about this from a Wellington Phoenix perspective is that Temple, who's the only coach to have returned to Wellington for a second season in their 4th year in the competition, has laid down the law in week 1 of his second season of this is the standard. If you don't meet it, I'm going to yank you and get a player in who can meet the standard. Is that really the only positive that Wellington can take out of this game?
Yeah, that and the first 10 to 15 minutes, because they did look very lively, very sharp. You thought, okay, we're onto something here. It could be an upset on the cards. But after that, they sort of deterred away, and it was sort of a bit, you know, just there was just nothing really. So in that second half, I think Temple, he had nothing to lose really. I mean, when you're losing by that margin, it's like, okay, let's just bring a couple of players on who he thinks can make a bit of a difference. And we saw last season the defensive structure and the unity within the squad for large parts of the season. That's one of the reasons why we were all so high on the Phoenix. They were impressive in that aspect, but in that first half, they just seemed a bit disjointed and a bit all over the place. And, it was too little too late, like you said, Poletti. Up until that point, I think Western took their foot off the gas a little bit and allowed Wellington to get a bit more into the game. But, I mean, it is a positive if you want to look at it that way, because at least Temple knows, the players that he can rely upon. I know it's very early days. It's only one game in. You've got fitness issues as well, trying to get into the flow and the rhythm. So it's going to take a bit of time for all teams in the competition. And we've seen it with a couple of the big clubs, with Sydney and City, for example. So, from that perspective, there's no need to panic as such. But I do think, after that first 15 minutes, it did die down in terms of the flow of the game. And if they can just brush up that, I do think there is potential there. And Temple is a very proven coach. I spoke to him last season, pleasure to interview him, and just the way he emphasizes the possession on the ball. And Burke touched on it on their on the preview piece for Round Ball Australia. They do have the science. It's just all about molding it together. And I think if they do have the time during the season, it is a 22-game season. They do have the time to do it. Whether they can is a different question altogether. But I think more credit has to be given to Western, because I thought they were phenomenal for after that 15-minute stretch.
Burke, do you think there's any sort of concern for Western and Cat Smith that they did get run off the pitch for the first 15 minutes, or is the fact that they played a full 75 minutes after that, cancelled out the goal, went ahead, a minute later, and didn't look back from there?
I think if you can respond like that, you don't really need to worry. Obviously, a full 90-minute game where the entire team is present and firing is ideal and what you want, but next best is 75 minutes that look like that. You can't really complain that much. Obviously, a clean sheet would have been nice, but no one in the league knows about a clean sheet, so yeah, I don't see it as being too big of a problem, especially when you have a player like Chloe Lagazzo, who has just an innate desire to not take anything lying down. She did it for the Matildas. She's doing it for Western. So, yeah, if there's anyone that can rally a team around them, it's Lagazzo when the moment requires. So,
And with that, we'll head to the nation's capital. Canberra 3, Brisbane 2. Brisbane dominated the first 45 minutes of this one, but went into the break 2-0 down, failing to capitalise on their dominance. That seems to be a common theme of this round so far. Sally James was fantastic for Canberra, despite conceding 2 goals. Maya Markovsky has scored a brace on her return to the dub. But was the season of bullying really all she needed to restart her career?
probably, yeah. I think Markovsky looked great on the pitch. I think it was Kieran Yap who tweeted the video of her goal, and you could see she was behind the half line and realized what was happening, what she was going to do. I haven't seen, or like I can't recall seeing a striker playing like that since, since Sam Kerr, really, where you can just see it's like a prey animal, like just spots that one moment and goes. Yeah, I think she played really well. I think her and Heyman are going to be a nightmare for absolutely everyone this season, and I'm really happy for Canberra to get the win. Sorry to Brisbane and their beautiful away kit, but I think Canberra getting this win after everything that they have been through in the off season, the not knowing if Heyman's coming back, the financial woes, getting this win at home was really, really good for them.
I mean, it's interesting you mentioned that, sort of the two up front. You handle Michelle Heyman, but then you got Markovsky to deal with. You deal with Markovsky, you've got Heyman to deal with on the other side. And we saw that with their first goal, where Heyman takes a shot, comes back out off the keeper, and there's Maya Markovsky in a mountain of space, unmarked, just inside the 18-yard box, puts it home. It was just a beautiful team goal there, and that attack's really going to cause a lot of sides trouble this year. You mentioned the away kit, and my bugbear with the away kit, now that I have seen it in action, why the gold numbering? It does not look good on the broadcast unless you have a close-up camera angle, like in the sun at McKellar Park on the broadcast. I couldn't read what number was which. I can only imagine how terrible it is for the commentators. I mean, I'd have absolutely no issue with it if it was like, the rest of the kit is like it's white and maroon, so use the maroon numbering. Like that stands out. That's good. Don't put light numbering on a light kit. It just doesn't work. But besides that, the Brisbane looked really good in this game. They probably win this on another day. Said they dominated the first half. just couldn't really put it away in front of goal, Christian.
I don't know how on earth they did not come away with the 3 points because, like you said, they absolutely obliterated Canberra's goal. I think they had over 20 shots in the game, and the fact that I know they scored 2 goals, but they should have had 5 or 6, honestly. And again, it goes back to the not the problem isn't getting the ball up there. It's about converting those chances, and you've got Sean Fryer in there. You've got Tamika Yallop, who even last season played in a bit more of an advanced role. We saw Yallop more play as a winger, but for me personally, I'd probably play him more as a midfielder, and because Brisbane, this current squad needs someone there with that bit of leadership and that bit of personnel, because without her in there in the middle of the park, I think Brisbane do struggle a lot. So yeah, it was good though. It was good signs, but again, if you don't convert those chances, a team like Canberra, who even last season they finished second last, but despite all the defensive frailties that we knocked them for, going forward with the likes of Michelle Heyman, May Markovsky, they're absolutely deadly and lethal, and you give them a few opportunities. Canberra can afford to concede 2 goals, and they'll score 3 or 4 up the other end. Whereas I think Brisbane going forward, it's a bit they need to really sort out the defensive side of it first, because I just struggle with this side to see where the goals are coming from. They had Mia Corbin last season. She was a real integral part, in terms of the attack. One of their few, I guess, bright spots, you could argue. And then, let's not forget Gareth McPherson, the way he left the season the first few rounds last year. So we sort of gave Brisbane a bit of a pass mark. Their season sort of unraveled a bit. But now this season, they've had a full off season with Alex Smith to sort of, get back on track. So I think after the first few rounds, they really don't have any excuses. I know that the talent depth isn't there compared to other teams in the competition, but I still do expect them to at least be fighting for a final spot.
Burke, they welcomed Sydney FC to Perry Park on the weekend. Both sides coming off very disappointing losses, but with vastly different scorelines and vastly different styles of play. Is it too early to call this game must win for either side? Like, I know it's only round 2, but both sides going on 2 straight losses. Brisbane welcome Perth in round 3, Sydney Derby in round 2. Is it you kind of need to get your season on track now?
I mean, if this were like 2 or 3 seasons ago, absolutely, because you simply didn't have the games to be messing around with. I think now that we have the full home and away season, there is a bit more leniency, and you do actually have more time.
There's
So
more room for error.
yeah, and
Yeah.
if players get injured, it's not going to always be a season-ending injury, because again, you've got more time. So I don't think it's necessarily we're not at a do or die moment yet. If this were like week 9 or 10, I'd be getting a bit worried, especially for a team like Sydney. I mean, not that worried, but worried. Like if they were pulling out performances like that in like week 9 or 10, I'd be trying to find out what is happening back there, because it can't be good. I don't think it's do or die yet. Obviously, Sydney needs to respond, and I expect them to come out guns blazing their next game, because a 3-1 loss to Central Coast doesn't look good at all for them.
I agree with everything you just said. We'll head to Newcastle now. It was a 2-2 draw. Jets came back from 2-0 down. Ryan Campbell post game described it as giving 2 points away. Was also willing to cut some slack towards the newer players and newer signings on the team, saying that it takes time for the players to get used to how we want to play. So they definitely, I guess, built into the game as it went on. That sort of grew into the game and got better, particularly once the heat and humidity started to take its effect in the second half. Sophie Harding, Sienna Silvesca shot the Wanderers out to 2-0 lead. Devon Jackson gets one back just before the break for Newcastle, before Lauren Allen scores the equalising goal about midway through the second half. Jam Khamis probably player of the match for the Wanderers, despite conceding 2 goals. Definitely kept the side in as the heat and humidity really began to take effect in this game for the visitors. I guess Christian, I'll come to you first. I don't want to say actually. I can't even really say a disappointing result for either side here. Based on the balance of play, the draw is probably the fair result here, even though Ryan Campbell disagrees.
Yeah, you could probably argue that. I mean, I think if you want to maybe suggest a side that would be more disappointed, it'd probably have to be the Wanderers, just given that they had that 2-0 lead heading into half time. They'd be bitterly disappointed that they weren't able to hold out. Because, yeah, this Jets side, I mean, before the opening round, I didn't know what to make of this side, to be honest. Obviously losing Serena Bolden and Melina Ayres, I think, up front. I was like, yeah, where are the goals going to come from? Because they have two teenagers in the starting lineup playing 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. So there's not much real proven talent there as such to, really, I guess, like I said, where are the goals going to come from? I know that creatively they do have the plays there, even Lauren Allen. They started off with the back five, but then it's sort of, inverted wing backs and they push a lot of plays forward. That's how they created a lot of opportunities in this game. So they are very flexible, tactically, but I guess, yeah, from a Jets perspective, it was just those couple of defensive mishaps in that first half, which really did cost them because besides that, you can't really fault them, in terms of the possession, the way they moved the ball. It was a bit much like last season. Just they didn't have a player like Melina Ayres or Serena Bolden up there to finish off those chances consistently. But they did score 2 goals. So I guess if you want to take one positive away from the game, it is that. But yeah, in terms of looking in long term finals football, I just don't know with this Jets side. And I know the Wanderers have improved a bit compared to last season. They've kept hold of Sophie Harding, but I think you got to wait until a real bigger test comes for this Jets side to really judge them. Because yeah, for the meantime, yeah, a point's probably fair. But yeah, I'm really interested to see once they come up against a real top quality side like a Sydney or a City or a Victory. That's when we'll get to see what this side's really made of.
Yeah, no, I think that is a fair assessment. They will play Western United at Unite Round on the 23rd of November. That is the later kickoff that day. So I mean that's a good a test as any against the top four side or a side that will be hoping for top four aspirations in Western United. Burke, on the Wanderers side of things here, last year I routinely kept on saying, when are the Wanderers going to fade away? When are they going to drop off? Because I've been conditioned to expect that from the Wanderers, even with a hot start, they're just going to fade away. They're just going to, it's not going to happen for them. And then they only just missed finals last year. They started strong here, heat and humidity aside, because we understand there's a reality of a summer competition, and some days it's going to be completely cool, and then other days you're going to need 4 drinks breaks in a game to get through the match. Based on what you saw in this game, the little bits that you would have seen, I know you were at work and this game ran simultaneously with the Melbourne City game. Did you see enough from the Wanderers here to suggest that finals is a real aspiration for this side this year?
Personally, no. I would love to be proven wrong, and I definitely could be, but at this point, no. If Like they always say that a 2-0 lead is the most dangerous lead to have in a game of football, and this game absolutely proves it. But Wanderers should be closing it out with a third goal. There's no reason that they shouldn't have. Um, and coughing up to a team like the Jets, like Christian said, that has two teenagers in it and lots of unproven talent, and is missing or has lost key goal scoring power. Like it doesn't scream we're going to be top four performance. But again, this is round one. Like anything could happen. We could see Western go on an absolute tear and then drop off. Um, but yeah, only time will tell.
The Wanderers do welcome Adelaide next week, and so if there was a time that they were going to go on with it, it would be against last season's Wooden Spoon, as you'd expect, even though, as we touched on, Adelaide looked remarkably better so far this year, compared to basically every game they played last season. We've got some Para Matildas news to touch on. Head coach Kelly Sturton has named a 10-player squad that will head to Salou, Spain to contest the IFCPF World Cup. They finished second at the last edition, did the Para Matildas, losing to the USA in the final. The squad consists of Ray Anderson, Georgia Bakeoff, Talia Blanchard, Anne-Marie de Uriarte, Lainey Harrison, Rebecca Jones, Eloise Northam, Trinity McPhee, Carly Salmon, and Caitlin Smith, both of whom Salmon and Smith are co-captains for the squad. Trinity McPhee with no caps, Rebecca Jones with no caps. So not only potential first-time Para Matildas, but World Cup debutants. And we saw a similar thing when Kai Lammett named his Para Rouge squad. A couple of players without caps named in that squad. We're going to have coverage of Round Ball Australia not only throughout the tournament but in the week leading into it, because I believe the Para Rouge flew out either today or they fly out tomorrow, and the Para Matildas will fly out later this week. So definitely stay across Round Ball Australia. We're going to talk more on the Para Matildas next week in depth. They're having their open media day later this week, so I'm hoping to get some interviews as long as there's no technical issues that we'll be able to play for you on the podcast here next week, as we look to stay across the coverage for both of the CP football sides representing Australia at the World Cup. We'll have a look ahead to next week's fixtures now. Western United and the Central Coast Mariners on Friday night, 7 p.m. kickoff again at Ironbark Fields. The Melbourne Derby at 2:15 on Saturday, and that is on 10 Bold as well. So it is free to air, that game. Brisbane Roar and Sydney at 4 p.m. on Saturday. Go to Wellington for capital punishment as they host Canberra United on Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. Western Sydney host Adelaide at 3 p.m. and Perth Glory and the Newcastle Jets with the early edition of the late kickoff, a 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time kickoff, as opposed to the usual 8 or 9 or 10 p.m. kickoffs that you're blessed with when it comes to Perth kicking off the last game of the round. Burke, are there any fixtures there that stand out to you as must watch?
Melbourne Derby for sure. I will be there. I will be seated for that. Yeah, that's the one.
Christian, can I expect the same answer from you?
No, if Burke didn't say that, I wasn't going to go there because I didn't want to sound biased. Poletti, you would have been saying, "Oh yeah, Melbourne team, Melbourne Derby, yeah." So I'll go with something different. For me, I think Western versus Central Coast Mariners, West United. I think that's going to be such an intriguing battle because I was mildly surprised by how well the Mariners did perform against Sydney. Like we said, it could be a case of Sydney starting a bit slow out of the blocks, but yeah, Western's going forward. I think West United were, it's to score 4 goals. I don't care against, whoever it is. I mean, that was pretty impressive. So, again, West United playing another home game against the Mariners. I'm really interested to see who comes out on top there. It could be another goal fest. Who knows?
For me, the game I'm looking forward to is Perth versus Newcastle. I really want to see how Perth at home at the Sam Kerr Football Centre, their new home, can bounce back from their defeat to Melbourne City, and how well the Newcastle Jets travel across to the west following their draw with the Wanderers. So for me, that one stands out as the most intriguing, the most must-watch. That being said, obviously, watch every fixture. You can get it all. We absolutely, encourage you to get out to the grounds if you can. We want to see more people in the stands. We want to see more people watching, and a lot of great action taking place, not only across round 2, but the remaining 21 rounds of the season after this week. But that will do us here on the Dubcast. Just a reminder, you can head to roundballaustralia.com.au. We will be doing a weekly report card for all 12 teams based on their performances throughout the round, and that will be dropping. We're aiming for Mondays, but today dropped on Tuesday as we record this. But head to the website early next week. You will be able to see it. You can follow us on Twitter at DubcastRBA. And subscribe to the Roundball Australia YouTube channel. Everything you can do to help support us is very greatly appreciated as we continue to grow the Round Ball Australia brand, but also the Dubcast brand. But that will do us for this week. Just as another quick reminder, new episodes every Wednesday. So like, share, subscribe, hit the little bell in your podcasting app to get notified when we drop our new episode every week. But thank you all very much for listening. Goodbye.